original tablets of the Ten Commandments are discovered, divine messages hidden in human DNA. Airlines place non-Christian pilots with Christian pilots in case the believer gets raptured. Welcome to Thinking Wisely with Dr. Isley, where we learn to live wisely by thinking wisely. Today, I'm going to review Dr. Gary Sjogren's book, Myth That We Christians Accept and Pass Along to Others. Dr. Sjogren, a New Testament scholar, exposes 40 myths or false claims that are believed in and passed around by Christians. It would be easy merely to show the error or even ridiculous nature of some of these claims. However, Dr. Sjogren does much more. He teaches us how to avoid being deceived in the future by similar ones. In doing so, the book's value goes beyond its more limited scope and can help all of us, Christian and non-Christian, learn how to navigate safely through the flood of fake news and shoddy thinking in order to discover the truth. I'll start with the review of myths that we Christians accept and pass along to others, and then afterwards explain the book's broader relevance. In the review, my focus will be on how Dr. Sjogren demonstrates the falsity of these myths. In doing so, he teaches us how to examine truth claims. He accomplishes this in several ways. I'll mention just 5. First, terms need to be clearly defined. In my videos on fascism and the brief series of blog posts on socialism, I argue that the proper definition of terms is essential to reasoned discussion and proper analysis. Links to these can be found below. Dr. Sjogren takes care to define his terms. For example, he gives a clear definition of the key term myth. A myth is a popular belief which circulated because it confirms deeply held values, but which is without basis in fact. For example, we Christians believe that the Bible is the Word of God. Naturally, we welcome evidence that it is historically accurate. Therefore, we are inclined to accept uncritically supposed archaeological discoveries or myths, such as the remains of Pharaoh's chariots in the Red Sea, that support our belief. This leads to the second helpful insight. Using contemporary research, Dr. Sjogren points out how we are all prone to cognitive or confirmatory bias. The human mind has the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms or supports one's current beliefs or values. This and other insights from cognitive science should make us carefully examine how we react to truth claims in order to avoid hasty and unfounded opinions. We need to distrust ourselves because of our biases and examine the evidence. Third, Dr. Sjogren also encourages us to do our research. He himself serves as an example by citing his sources, looking at contrary evidence, and making balanced assessments. Before we credit something as true and pass it on to others, we need to examine the sources, the history behind the claim, and use sound logic. As I said, the book displays this patient research and sound reasoning. Particularly helpful is the inclusion of an appendix that presents in summary form the principles used in the book and that can be then applied by all of us. Fourth, he gives us some sound advice for judging the truthfulness or falseness of some claim. For example, generally, the more surprising the claim, the more evidence it needs to support it. Also, there are warning signs that a claim is false. A person says, nobody else has ever seen this, or that the evidence has been destroyed or hushed up by scientists, such as the claim that the Smithsonian has been suppressing evidence of giant bones in America. Fifth, there is the moral issue. We need to be careful about passing on false claims to others, perhaps even excusing ourselves by saying, we don't know whether it's false or true, so we'll just share it. To do so is to break the commandment not to bear false witness. A court of law rejects hearsay evidence, or a witness who says that they don't know whether something is true. Jesus is the truth, and we Christians should value the truth. For example, the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 was very careful to present evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. Such was his commitment to truth that he writes in verse 16 that if Christ has not been raised from the dead, we are even found to be misrepresenting God. He recoiled with horror at the thought of saying something untrue about God. Of course, the evidence for the resurrection was solid, so Paul could unequivocally affirm that Christ had been raised from the dead. Another moral issue. Passing on myths also shows a lack of love for one's neighbor. As Christians, at a minimum, it is our responsibility to take care concerning what we say about others. Once a false story gets out on the internet, people's reputations are damaged, even if later the story is shown to be false. One time a pastor told me of his response to a woman who apologized for spreading lies about him and asking what she could do. He said that she needed to take a feather pillow to the top of a hill, cut it open, let the wind carry the feathers, and then retrieve them. When she said that was impossible, he said that the damage done to his reputation could not be undone. This should remind us not to judge hastily. Proverbs 12:18 counsels us, there is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. We are commanded to love. Spreading lies or unfounded claims harms the person lied about and the people lied to. This is not the way of love commanded by God. I highly, again, recommend myths that we Christians accept and pass along to others. It's not a difficult read and can help us from being deceived, deceiving others, even unintentionally, and not causing the name of Christ and the Word of God to be mocked by those who see Christians naively supporting and sharing false stories. I also recommend myths for anyone, regardless of their religious commitments or lack thereof. It can help all of us refrain both from spreading lies in society in these fractious political and cultural times, and from being deceived by those who want to take advantage of us. In these matters, we need to remember our cognitive biases, whether from the right or the left, conservative or progressive, Republican or Democrat. We often believe false or unsubstantiated claims. We want them to be true because they fit in with what we want to believe. This is especially true in the internet age, when we click on a video or article. We are then directed to similar stories from that perspective, and not to ones that hold a different viewpoint. This is how algorithms work. According to Oxford Languages, an algorithm is a data tracking system in which an individual's internet search history and browsing habits are used to present them with similar or related material on social media or other platforms. This is done for political and mercenary reasons. We need to take the time and make the effort to read differing views. The age of mass media and the internet is also full of logical errors. A common one is guilt by association, in which a person or an idea is judged by their connection with a group that is viewed unfavorably. This is a form of the ad hominem logical fallacy that attacks the person or his ideas because of some real or supposed links, rather than examining the arguments. I'll give two examples from both sides of the political spectrum. First, a recent for me anyway, that I read. Then presidential candidate Donald Trump held a rally at Madison Square Garden on October 27, 2024. On February 20th, 1939, the Nazis held a rally at Madison Square Garden. The conclusion? Donald Trump is a Nazi. Not only is the logical error of guilt by association obvious, but the Madison Square Garden of 2024 was not even the same building as the 1939 one. A second example. In 1933, Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, was interviewed. I have provided a link to the relevant portion of that interview below. In that interview, Goebbels spoke well of the efforts of President Roosevelt to employ the resources of the state to deal with the crisis of the Great Depression. With the guilt by association argument, one could claim that Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a Nazi, which of course is obviously false. Much more could be said along these lines. Once again, I encourage Christians and non-Christians alike to purchase Dr. Sjogren's book, Myths That We Christians Accept and Pass Along to Others. It's readily available on Amazon. See the link below. As always, comments are welcome. If you are interested in receiving these videos automatically, please click on the subscribe button below. Thank you for listening.